Hey, this is Tom Morcus, and you're listening to Join Up Dots with David Ralph.
Welcome to Join Up Dots, amazing conversation. Join Up Dots, get a dose of motivation. Join Up Dots, don't forget the inspiration. Welcome to the place that's got the light. Join Up Dots, Join Up Dots, Join Up Dots, Join Up Dots. Join Up, Join Up Dots.
Hello there once more in internet land. I hope you're all right today, whatever you're doing, wherever you're going. Hopefully you've got us playing a little bit of inspiration, a little bit of motivation to drive you on the way, not only to where you're going, i.e. A to B, but actually in your future as well. Today, I'd like to welcome to the show a man who literally has been to the top and back, and then back up to the top once more. It's truly a fascinating story of a man driven from an early age to make his mark on the world. A creative risk taker, he flourished early on and established himself as someone who can make things happen, bringing A-list celebrities to speak to Canada, earning over $84,000 in just a few hours, and moving and shaking with the best of them. Life was good. But then things changed and he found himself over $250,000 in cash debt. And worst of all, he had no business to help him recover and no idea of how to set about reversing his fortunes. But with an entrepreneurial mind born to overcome such obstacles, he did just that, and he rose to the top once more. You can now find him speaking with passion and eloquence on the top-rated Early to Rise podcast, or working on his Mastermind Talks series of presentations with such keynote speakers such as Tim Ferriss, Guy Kawasaki, Clay Herbert and Lewis Howes, to name just four. With all that going on, it's amazing that he's found time to speak to us today, but we are mightily glad that he has. Welcome to the show, the one and only, and my favourite Canadian after Michael Buble, of course, and Bryan Adams. And is Celine Dion Canadian? I don't know.
Oh,
anyway,
she is.
She is as well. Okay. My fourth favourite Canadian, Mr. Jayson Gaignard. How are you, sir?
I am lovely. Thank you for the kind introduction.
It is funny, actually, isn't it, with Canadians? It's a bloody big country. It's a huge country. But when I actually was sitting writing that introduction and I was thinking, name some famous Canadians, I struggled. Why is that? Are there a lot of sort of secret underground celebrity Canadians that I don't know about?
No, we I guess we just don't reproduce enough. Like you said,
it's cold up there, isn't it?
It's freezing right now.
You don't want to reproduce in weather like that.
That's maybe it. But I think we only have like 40-50 million people, which is like the equivalent of LA in the United States. So no, we're a big country in mass, but not in population. That's for sure.
How are you born and bred Canadian?
I am. I was born in a city called Toronto, which is one of the major cities in Canada, and a beautiful city at that. And I live just an hour outside of Toronto now. And
is it very sort of, to use a word, countrified? I suppose that's not the right word to use, but is it a pretty place to live, or is it quite an industrial area you live in? There's quite a few farms, I guess, in the area where I live in. So I live in a place called Waterloo, which is the tech hub of Canada to a degree. So the Silicon Valley of the equivalent of Silicon Valley in the United States. So it's actually a little city that's growing rather quickly. But if you drive 15, 20 minutes outside this little city, it's pretty much all farms. Unfortunately, not much to look at unless you love looking at cows and pastures. But it's like you made mention, it is a beautiful country. It's a big country, and there's a lot to see, that's for sure. It is. Everyone who's been to Canada, and I'm guilty, I've never been there. I've done every state bar 2 in America, and I've skirted along, but I've never actually been into Canada. And people say to me, oh, you've got to go, it's absolutely amazing. But it just seems cold. And I met a couple of Canadians in, New Orleans once. And they said they were born and bred Canadians and they still haven't got used to the winters. Now, that's got to be cold, isn't it? If you've been born there and you still can't get used to it.
Well, I mean, we get similar weather to, places like New York. We're only about an hour flight from New York. So It's not freezing all over Canada per se. Definitely some areas are much colder than others, but yeah, I mean, we get oftentimes the same weather as most of the northern states would get.
Well, let's get on to your life, because as the introduction said, it's a movie, isn't it? It's a movie to be made with probably Bruce Willis playing the part of yourself. Because it's been a roller coaster ride, hasn't it, from start to finish?
It has been, and there's actually, so there are a few things in regards to the story that were a little different. Where I was actually, so I dropped out of high school. Well, in high school, in grade 12, we have it goes up to grade 13 here, but I dropped out in grade 12, and I started my first business, and then I changed that business, and I grew that to about $7 million a year, over 4 years. And then what happened was, I despised the industry that I was in, and I ended up. I was making a ton of money financially. I was actually making 22 times the national average income at the time, but it became clear to me that money and happiness scale very differently. I knew I wasn't 22 times happier than the average male. I knew I wasn't 22 times healthier than the average male. So I decided to make a change. And at the time, the only option I saw was to sabotage my business. So I went from a $6-7 million a year business, making a ton of money financially, personally, to with the intention of landing at zero and closing the business and starting something new. However, unfortunately, two things happened that were beyond my control that landed me $250,000 in cash debt, which was August of 2012. And that was, quote unquote, my rock bottom, financially, personally, spiritually, physically, pretty much on every facet. That was my lowest. And then I started working my way back up. And that's how I got actually into the event space with Mastermind Talks, and that's kind of my upswing right now is Mastermind Talks.
Did anybody at that time think that you were going mad? Because the majority of people that are listening into this show are probably doing jobs that they don't like, not being paid for the value that they provide in their sort of mind. And here you are, you're bringing in 6 or 7 million a year and hating it and trying to sabotage it. Now that would seem lunacy in many ways. And did anyone at that time say, Jayson, what the hell are you doing? Just have a break, walk away, go and live on a beach for a while, and then come back fresh?
Sure, absolutely. And I definitely could have done things, I guess, a little differently, but it was one of those things I knew that the people who I surrounded myself with at the time didn't really understand it, nor could I make them understand. And since then, I've realized that a lot of entrepreneurs go through these phases of self-sabotage, because it's not about the money. You hear that all the time. Like, it's easy for somebody who's wealthy to say it's not about the money because they have money. And I totally understand that and totally get that. But it doesn't equate to being fulfilled, right? It's one of those things like the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. Once you have your basic necessities taken care of, you got your food, you got your water, you got your shelter, then you start asking questions like, why am I here? Will I be remembered? How many people show up to my funeral? And when I was asking myself those questions, I was not happy with the answers I was giving myself. So I knew I had to change. And for me, that involved creating a business that would light me up, and the finances would come second. And that's what I've been able to create. It was not an easy journey, and it's a journey that not a lot of entrepreneurs will do, or people in general. Sometimes they won't have that moment where they stop and think and stop and question things until they're on their deathbed, right? And they start asking those questions. Will I be remembered when it's already too late? So it happened to me when I was between 26 and 28, that entire phase. So I'm very grateful that it happened at that early age, and I was able to get clear on what was important, instead of later on in life, or even worse, on my deathbed.
Is being remembered important to you, though?
It is. I think being remembered is a good marker for how much impact you had, on the world to a degree. I mean, I've always said to myself ever since I was a kid that the true mark of somebody's value to a certain degree is how many people show up to their funeral. Because you could have $1 billion in the bank and your wife won't even show up to your funeral, your kids won't even show up to your funeral, or you can be the barber down the street and have 5,000 people, and that's happened before. So it's not necessarily, doesn't come down to the money per se. It comes down to the impact. And to me, being remembered is just an indication that you lived a good life of contribution, and you contributed to stuff outside of yourself.
I had a similar thought probably about 10, 15 years ago. And I'm now at a point where I'm creating a brand new future for myself. And really, I don't know where it's going to go. It's amazingly exciting. But also, I wake up each morning thinking, oh, my God, what am I doing? Is this stable? Blah, blah, blah. And everything that you probably have thought over the years. But I remember actually going to a place in northern England, and it's called Hadrian's Wall. I don't know if you've heard it. And
No.
the Romans basically built this wall in Roman time, how many years ago that was, and it was to separate Scotland from England. And you can go up there, and this wall, it's a kind of like mini Great Wall of China, really, but you can see parts of it running through Newcastle and round Scotland and stuff. And I was standing there looking at this, and most of it is kind of broken down and sort of in disrepair. But it suddenly dawned on me that some Roman soldier was probably earning nothing at all, laid that brick, and it is still there today. And that one soldier, with his one bit of effort, has left his mark on the world. And as I stepped away from that, I thought to myself, really, where's my mark? For that same thought that you were saying, where is my mark on the world? Am I going to leave a mark? How many people do leave marks on the world? And somebody once said to me, and I don't know if this is true, but less than 1% of all the people that have ever lived on this earth have actually either created something, invented something, or left a mark. 99% of people in all history have come and gone, and nobody other than family, whatever, knows that they've been here. That is astonishing, isn't it?
No, and I think it's probably, unfortunately, highly accurate. And to me, hearing something like that is absolutely terrifying. Because again, I mean, I don't do this stuff kind of out of ego. I don't want to be remembered out of ego or anything like that. I want to be remembered for, again, contributing to people and making their lives better. So no, I like the analogy with that kind of revelation you had with that wall. That's an interesting way to put it.
I think that you will leave your mark because getting the shows together, I have to do a certain amount of investigation. And everything that I seem to have found out about you is about human interaction. You seem to thrive on one-to-one. And it was quite interesting. Just before we came live today, I was watching a video that you was talking about on your podcast. And if anybody wants to go over to it, it's called Mastermind Talks. And I will touch why... Is Early to Rise podcast different to Mastermind Talks? Has it been rebranded?
We're actually in the process of rebranding now. So we launched and it was really successful out of the gate, and then ran into some very weak trademark issues, which caused iTunes to actually delete the podcast. So we're relaunching in about 2 weeks, so middle of April, under the Mastermind Talks brand. So it's no longer going to be called Early to Rise. It's going to be called Mastermind Talks.
Right, okay. Because I listened to all of them, and I actually contacted you by email probably about
thank you.
5 months ago, and we had a little sort of afternoon of email communication back and forth. But I actually listened to all of them back to back, and I listened to about 5 or 6 episodes at that time that was released. And the thing that came across totally was your humanity. You were genuinely out there to, number one, make people's lives better, but have a connection with people. And everything you seem to be doing was about making a personal connection. Is network important to your life? Is that something that has developed, or is that something that you've always had a focus on, making connections across the globe?
Sure. I mean, relationships are absolutely enormous. I mean, the reason I was able to quote unquote bounce back so quickly, because when I was, $250,000 in cash debt, that's in Canadian funds. So I'm not sure what that is in pounds.
It's probably a lot of money.
It's a lot, 180,000 or something like that. Yeah, I mean, that was a very tough point because for the first time in my life, I didn't have a business. I didn't have money coming in. When you have $1 million a month coming in through your business and then that stops, it's terrifying. It's a tough pill to swallow. So yeah, no, it was definitely a very kind of it was an interesting, trying time.
So is network important? But for somebody out there at the moment listening in, and they're driving in their car or they're sitting on the train going to work, building up a network, is that one of the most important things you can do if you are starting any venture? Or is it more important to focus on anything else?
No, I mean, I think it's the key. Well, it's one of the keys to happiness. I mean, if you research some of the pillars of happiness, having social interaction is one of the keys. And even though in this world we're hyper connected through Facebook and Twitter and all these platforms, we're kind of relationship wise, we're kind of bankrupt. So that's, I mean, on a personal kind of fulfillment level, that's what relationships are really, that's why relationships are really of value. From a business kind of professional level, I mean, it's everything. Like when I hit rock bottom, there's two things I realized that I was left with. I was left with my relationships, and I was left with my word. And from that point forward, it became very clear that I should always invest in my relationships, and I should never tarnish my word. I should always kind of hold myself with a high level of integrity. And that became clear to me actually when I never asked. When I built my first business, I never got a penny from anybody. I never got any investors, none of that kind of stuff. When I hit $250,000 of cash debt, had no business, I was down and out, I had an opportunity to do an event. And that opportunity was, I had to basically raise $84,000 in only a few hours. I had to raise money basically by the end of the day. I've never asked anybody for any money in my life in the past. And I reached out to three people. I called them up and I said, listen, I have this crazy business idea. Here's an opportunity on the table. I need $84,000. What do you think? Two out of the three people were ready to front me the money right away. They were ready to write me a check. And when I look back and I asked them, why did you invest at the time, like, why'd you give me that money? Because I didn't have a formal business plan or anything like that. It was an idea. And as an entrepreneur, you get ideas all the time. There's no value in that per se. And it's incredibly risky. Both of them said that the reason we gave you the money is because we were investing in you. We know that you'd pull yourself out, whether it was this business venture or another one. We saw it as an opportunity to invest in you. And that, again, kind of really clarified that you never know the value of your network until you really need it, and to never tarnish, again, your word. Because my word up until that point was that, if I'm going to do something or I'm going to pay somebody back, they're going to get paid back, or whatever the case may be. I held myself with a high level of integrity, and that was really important. So from both a personal perspective and your personal health and fulfillment, there's a huge value to being connected to people on a relationship basis, and also from a professional perspective. I mean, my story is a great example of how things can turn around extremely quickly when you surround yourself with the right people.
Over the episodes that I've been fortunate enough to have amazing guests sharing their stories and their successes and failures, the two main things that have come out of everything is a lot of them didn't know what they were doing. They stumbled around, they worked in stores, they did odd jobs, and it wasn't until sometimes quite late in life they suddenly found a passion, an enthusiasm, an idea, and they ran with it. And the second thing was, once they found that, they took action even though they were scared. They were frightened because they'd never done this kind of thing before. Now, you strike me as different, and you strike me, just from talking to you now, that if I went back to the 5-year-old Jayson Gaignard, you'd be pretty much like you are now. You'd be out there hustling and sort of getting around and mowing people's lawns for a few quid and stuff. Is that right? Is there much difference between you now? Because I just get that vibe that there isn't.
Yeah, no, I mean that the whole mowing the lawn and newspaper delivery and that kind of stuff, those were all things I did do at a young age, and that really kind of begs the question, is being an entrepreneur, for example, nature or nurture? So there's different kind of philosophies around that, but Robert Greene has in his book Mastery talks about how we all at one point in time in our childhood really kind of demonstrate what we're here for or what we're here to master to a certain degree, whether it be writing or anything like that. Usually I think it's around the ages of 8 to 12. It's just oftentimes we get pushed into other things because of our parents, or whatever the case may be, and we start getting tied up, and we go to high school, and we want to go to college, and we want to get a career, and that kind of stuff. And then after a while, we end up rediscovering what we really enjoyed, which was, again, apparent when we were younger, just nobody was attuned to it. So and I know this was the case with, for example, Neil Strauss is a well-known author and is a good friend of mine. I think he's wrote 7 New York Times best-selling books. And that was one thing he realized with himself as well, is that he did all different kinds of stuff. He was like a club promoter and then did all kinds of stuff. And then he became an author. And then when he looked back, his mom gave him like a box of all of his stuff from when he was a kid. And he actually found an old journal when he was like 8 or 9, talking about like how he wanted to write books and that kind of stuff. And he used to write prolifically when he was a kid. So he showed those traits early on. I just think oftentimes we have to rediscover them. But I'm known to be, especially as of, with my new business and stuff like that, to be very much in alignment with what I do. I mean, what I do truly lights me up, and it's completely different from what I was doing before, when it was based purely on what most entrepreneurs do, is find, well, how can I make the most money? Where's the opportunity?
Yeah.
And then they build their life around that, as opposed to with this business, I got clear on the life I wanted.
But you
and then
did
I built
that,
the
didn't
business
you?
around that.
Your first business seemed
100%.
to be 100%, as you say, down that line, show me the money.
Exactly, absolutely. And that's what the thing is. I mean, coming back to relationships, those were the people. There's that quote by Jim Rohn: "You're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with." Back then, I was, a budding entrepreneur, and I surrounded myself with people who were a few steps ahead of me, but they were all focused on the financial side of business, right? That I, just like most of us are. We think the more money we have, the happier we'll be. So my focus, like everybody else's, was to make more money, and that's where I ended up, with that to that inflection point where I couldn't take it anymore. As opposed to, like I said, then I got clear on what I really wanted, because at the day, a business at the core function of business is to make money, and money at its core function is really to perpetuate experiences in our day-to-day lives. So if we get clear on what we want those experiences to be, then we can build a business around that. And I think that's it's a more holistic kind of approach to entrepreneurship that unfortunately not a lot of entrepreneurs do.
So what talents have you got, Jayson, that the average man in the street hasn't got? Because I haven't got what you've got, and I don't know what you've got, but it seems to be like an X factor. It seems to be a quality. You seem to be driven from such an early age. You're dropping out from high school, creating a new company. If I had dropped out of high school, I would have probably gone into a job and just become an employer. And I was for many, many, many years. This is the first time I've ever thrown caution to the wind and done anything entrepreneurial. And I'll be honest, I'm in it, and as I say, I'm scared every day, but I kind of think it's my thing. I've suddenly found this enjoyment that I haven't had for years and years and years. But you had it at such an early age. So what skills did you have that made you think, yes, I can create my own company?
It's funny because I actually did something called DISC profile test as of late, which is a kind of a personality profile test. And one of the overwhelming markers on my test was the need to be independent. So independence and being unique. So that was one of the core reasons why, when I look back, why I couldn't comply with, working for other people per se, because again, I couldn't feel unique in those environments.
Yeah.
So a lot of my pursuits, I'm not an incredible entrepreneur from a business perspective, like as far as being like the whole package. I just have a deep, deep yearning to, again, leave a mark and be unique. And in order to do that, there's no better vehicle than being an entrepreneur. There's no vehicle that gives you as much freedom and as much control as being an entrepreneur. So that's just kind of naturally the career path I gravitated towards, because I guess that's what I needed in order to truly live within, I guess, the way I was designed, at least from an emotional perspective.
Has it been easier for you because you feel that you are designed that way? Somebody sitting on the train, hating their job, going in and being an employee and wishing that they could take control of their own life. Do they need to be wired the same way as you? You hang around enough entrepreneurs. Do you know that there's a common theme that runs through them, or is it something that you can fake until you make it?
I think just generally the need for freedom is a common kind of thread for most entrepreneurs. When you dig down deep enough, dig down behind why they're making the money and all those kind of things, it's definitely that sense of freedom. And that's as far as like, is that something you're born with, or is it as something you can learn? I don't know. I know one of the scariest points of my whole journey was when I hit rock bottom and I knew I was unemployable, because I had a business for 6, 7 years prior to that, and I knew I'd rather live in a shelter than work for somebody else, because I tasted that freedom for 6, 7 years and I would die for it. So I don't know if it's, again, that hunger can be taught to a degree. I mean, all these little things, as far as, in alignment with the theme of the show, joining up the dots. Like if I didn't meet that specific mentor that certain specific time, would I have, done B, C, D, and worked my way up to where I am? It's always one of those questions that always kind of goes through my head. I think about it all the time, especially as of late, those little things. And it makes you look back, and it makes you appreciate the journey you have, for sure.
Because I've got a friend that I've kind of built up a relationship, only loosely, but you know him as well, Mr. Michael O'Neill from the Solopreneur Hour.
Yeah,
and if anybody out there is looking for a podcast to listen to, then go over to solohour.com and listen, because it's a great show and he provides great content 3 times a week. But before you do that, listen to my show again, because it's good for the downloads. But he says that there's a point in many entrepreneurs' life when they simply know too much. They've seen too much on the other side to ever go back to becoming an employee again. Were you ever an employee?
I was throughout high school. I worked. One of the core reasons why I ended up leaving school is because I was working 40 hours a week while in high school, because I couldn't see the value in being in school and not getting paid, versus where I can make a decent wage working outside of it. So I did work. In the traditional sense, I wasn't always an entrepreneur, but I knew. It would drive me nuts if I saw waste, especially in the corporate environment. You see a lot of waste and that kind of stuff, and not being listened to, and all those kind of things. It's for me, those are big pain points. Again, that's probably one of the main drivers that has made me an entrepreneur and that keeps me an entrepreneur. Because again, on paper, if you look at me as an entrepreneur, I'm probably not the greatest as far as being a well-rounded entrepreneur. I'm not good with finances. I'm not good at hiring A-class people. I'm not good at managing people. Those are 3 important factors, and I am brutal at all 3. What I am good at is I'm good at marketing, and I'm good at creating, looking into the future and visions and that kind of stuff. I'm very much kind of the visionary guy. Yeah, in this sense of a traditional entrepreneur, I'm probably not your best example, but I have, I know I have that yearning to never go back to working for somebody else, because it won't work.
So you can totally understand that phrase, I know too much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, like I said, to me, I felt it. Like when I say I know too much, like I know too much in regards to how freedom feels like, to be able to wake up on a Monday and have both the freedom of time and money to be like, there's nothing going on the rest of the week. I'm gonna take my girlfriend. We're gonna go to France tomorrow. I've done that. I mean, when you have that level of freedom, you'll never want to work for I cannot imagine working 9 to 5 for somebody and somebody telling me when I can go for lunch. Like, that is mind blowing to me. That would even be. I can't even grasp it. A friend of mine recently, somebody close to him died. It was a good friend of his passed. And he had to ask his boss if he could take time off to go to the funeral. And I'm like, I can't, like, how you have to report that to somebody and get their approval. You know what I mean? Like, what a terrible way to live. And the beauty of all of this is that there's no better time to be an entrepreneur. It's never been easier. The technology is getting cheap. I mean, 30, 40 years ago, I don't know if I could have been an entrepreneur, because 30, 40 years ago, you'd have to open a brick and mortar business and which caused, well, basically, if you had a business idea, you'd have to save up a ton of money. You'd have to get investors, or whatever the case may be. You'd have to sign a 3-year lease on some kind of business. You'd have to hire a bunch of employees. You'd have to do a bunch of marketing, and then you'd open the doors and you'd hope you get a sale.
Yes.
There was a ton of risk involved. Now you can start making money by doing a podcast. You can write an ebook and put it up on Amazon and be, go against big name traditional publishers and traditional authors. You can do a website with a blog. You can start a website tomorrow doing e-commerce. And it's not necessarily, you don't always have to take the plunge either. That's the beauty of this as well with technology and the scalability and of everything, is that you can start a side business on the side just on weekends, once or 1 hour or 2 hours a night working on it, and build up something enough that it gets close to replacing your income right now. Because that's the biggest fear. The biggest fear is that if I quit my job, start something new, how long is it going to take for me to start making that money? That uncertainty is the killer.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we live in a beautiful time where you can start making that you can start building up those blocks on the side and building up that momentum, so that eventually it gets to a point where you feel comfortable and quitting is just the next logical choice.
What I want to say to people is, it is so cheap to do things now online, and you don't have to take a risk. Now, I've been planning this for about 3 years, and over those 3 years, when I got to the point that I just couldn't bear the pettiness of an office, and I couldn't bear having my happiness dictated to by one individual. I could be happy if that individual wasn't in the office, and if that individual was in there, I'd be miserable. So it just wasn't worth it. So I started working night after night after night on affiliate programs and other sort of online businesses. And some of them were moderately successful, and some of them were abject failures. But every single one of them led me on a path to where I am now. And all in all, I probably spent about £900, I imagine, and probably recouped about £600. So I'm probably about £300 down over the 3 years. But what I've got is a future which is bright and promising, as long as I crack on and work hard and play to my strengths. And other people can do that as well. And they don't. They go into the same crappy jobs day in, day out. They moan until they get to Friday, and then they go off down the pub where they stand around in groups of people moaning about their week, and then 2 days later they go into it again. And I want to say to them, you have got such opportunity in front of you to do stuff, and all you've got to do is turn on your computer and start reading and seeing what other people are doing, and try to get ideas and try to experience things that you're not doing just going into that job all the time. Be creative. It's not going to take a lot of risk. It's not going to take a lot of money, but God, the positives that might come out of it is amazing. People don't do it, and it annoys me, Jayson. It annoys me.
I can tell. And it definitely annoys me too. I mean, there's a saying that everybody wants to shine like a diamond, but nobody wants to get cut. And it's not an easy path. But again, nobody wants to put in the hard work, and it is hard work. I mean, for years before I became officially an entrepreneur and everything was successful, I mean, I put in the hours. And right now with my new venture, I'm still putting in the hours. Like, I'm doing work that I should not be doing, the other people would say I should not be doing, but I got to do it. I got to build this back up. I have to plant the seeds in order to kind of reap the rewards at a later date. The beautiful thing is that it's investing in myself. I'm investing in my future instead of investing into somebody else's business. So, I mean, if I'm working for somebody else, I'm just basically, I'm filling their coffers to a certain degree. I'm investing in their future. I should be investing in my own.
How do you stop, Jayson? How do you go, right, I'm not going to do this tonight. I'm going to watch Netflix on the sofa for a couple of hours? Because that's the problem with sort of entrepreneurial work.
Sure.
You so enjoy it that it almost becomes a hobby that you want to do more than anything else.
100%. I mean, there's anything... So there's this thing called 6 basic needs. There's like certainty, uncertainty, love and connection, growth and contribution, and significance. And being an entrepreneur and being in business, hits all of them. And there's a saying that if you hit 3 of them, it becomes an addiction. And a lot of people are addicted to their business and addicted to that entire process, right? They build their businesses at the expense of their family, at the expense of their health, at the expense of their relationships. And it comes down to that whole thing where, one day they'll ask themselves, do I really matter? Do I have good relationships? Those kind of things. So it's definitely a balance, especially with me. I only have one child, so I have no clue how you do it, but it's a constant battle between the business, especially at this phase that when I'm growing it, which it requires me to invest a lot of time and the time with my daughter and my wife, because they're my priority. It's a constant thing, because my viewpoint on everything is obviously the hard work I put in now. The more work I put in now is the more we can benefit from it later and really enjoy it as a family.
But do they get that viewpoint as well? Do they understand? How old's your daughter?
She's 2.
Because my daughter's 8, my youngest one's 8, and she says to me, Daddy, you left your job so you didn't have to work as hard, and you're working harder now than you did before. And I kind of say to her, yes, but I'm building something for the future. It's for us. I will take you to Disney World first class. But for years and years and years, I was putting her to bed every single night. But now I'm probably doing it 3 times a week because other things are sort of taking up my time. Does your 2-year-old kind of understand that, no, actually Daddy's got priorities and she's got to go off? Because I don't think she does, really.
Yeah, no, at that age, I don't think they understand too much per se. But I mean, my wife, she understands. She definitely understands. However, obviously, it does bother her from time to time. I mean, when I'm home, I am home. Like I spend an hour with my daughter at night, and I see her first thing in the morning. Then I go off to the office and stuff like that. So I make sacrifices. Something has to give. And for me right now, it's probably my health to a degree. I'm probably not getting as much sleep as I should, and those kind of things. But to me, my family is a huge priority, and building this business is a priority. And it's one of those things, like there's a saying, as entrepreneurs, we always say we put our family first and that kind of stuff. But if you want to see what somebody really values, take a look at their schedule. If their family is not, like if you say, give me your schedule for the last week, I want to see where you allocated your time, and you didn't allocate your time with your wife, going on a date or something like that, or just spending time with her one-on-one, and you didn't spend time with your child, and you really didn't allocate that, but you had meetings all week or whatever the case may be, I can tell you exactly what you value. You can say, a lot of people will say what they want to project, right? They say, oh yeah, I value my family, but really take a look at your schedule and see how much you really value them. And that was an eye-opener for me. And when I looked at my schedule, I mean, they were in there, but when I did spend time with them, I wasn't present. It wasn't planned. I had nothing planned. My days are planned out business-wise. I know when I'm going to do emails. I know when I'm going to do phone calls. When I have time with my daughter, for the longest time, nothing was planned. I was there. And because I was there, I was not 100% present because I was thinking about business issues. Now, that's a problem as well, is being present. It's not necessarily always about time. Spending a good hour with my daughter, quality time with no cell phone, is better than spending 2 full days with her being disconnected. Yeah, disconnected to her.
No, I accept that, and I found, I love my kids, I love my family, passionately, but a lot of the time, being with a 2-year-old daughter, people go, oh, it's wonderful, it's brilliant. It's not. It's a bit boring, really, and they want to do what they want to do because they're 2-year-olds, and you've got to sit there watching Dora the Explorer and stuff while you're thinking, really, I should be doing something else, and but she needs me to be here. And it is that balance, isn't it? Because she doesn't understand your world, and you don't really understand her world, and there's that kind of middle ground that you kind of exist between the two stools.
Sure. I mean, and there's a bunch of different kind of angles to it. Like I try not to do any work from home. That was a big thing for me, is separating home from work. So when I'm at home, I'm very rarely on the computer in front of her. And the reason being is because one day I was on my computer on my laptop, and she stood up. She was just starting to walk, and she grabbed my computer monitor, and it just flashed in my head. And I'm like, I never want her to unconsciously think that I picked work up over her. So I knew I had to draw a clear line in the sand that I have an office. I had to get an external office. And although financially it was not the best timing for me, I knew it was something I had to do.
I've done the same. I've done exactly the same.
Yeah, it's really important because, again, it's easy. It's super easy to blur the lines when you're at home and checking your cell phone or hopping on for a quick few emails or whatever the case may be. And presence is everything. And it's something I'm not a master of by any stretch, but something I'm definitely I'm making great strides towards. Hey, we're never going to master it. We'll never be perfect at it, and things are always going to change. But I'm conscious of it when not a lot of people are, and I think that's the big thing, is that not a lot of people are conscious of how much time they spend on email and how often they aren't really present with their family and that kind of stuff.
Now, what I want to do is take you right up to the present. I think we've spent enough time talking about the sort of the past, the lead up to it. Mastermind talks. Now, you're spending time with not just sort of A-listers, sort of double A-listers, A-plus listers. How do you get that kind of network of guys coming to you and saying, yes, I want to be on these talks? It's difficult just getting one person to do it, but that list is amazing. How have you done that?
Relationships. I mean, I built kind of how you build a business, and you put the hard work in, and one day you'll reap the benefits. Same thing with relationships. I mean, those relationships with the Tim Ferrisses of the world and the Ryan Holidays and all these big name speakers, I reached out to them well before I ever thought I'd do an event, and I just wanted to, and I did it on a genuine level. It was always about delivering value to them and just building a relationship. And then when the time came and I actually needed to ask for something, they were all more than happy to help me out. So it was one of those things, like a lot of those big name speakers, it's the relationships I've been building and forging and reinforcing for the past 2-3 years.
What is Mastermind Talks? For people sitting out there now going, okay, I've heard the name, the podcast is being rebranded, but actually what is the value of attending a Mastermind Talks presentation or seminar?
So in essence, Mastermind Talks is an invite-only event for entrepreneurs. And the core focus is to put 100 incredible people in the room. That's really what it is at its core. We bring in these big name speakers, and they're all fantastic, but we know if we bring the right speakers, we'll draw the right audience. And if we have the right audience in the room, you could just make magic happen. I mean, people come for the content, but they stay for the community. And when you're an entrepreneur, it can be very isolating at times because you're always working in your business, you're working in your own little kind of silo, and it's very rare that you have an opportunity to connect with like-minded individuals. So it was really created as an environment to connect entrepreneurs. And it's just not entrepreneurs in the kind of general theme of you have to run a business. There's much more to it than that. We have a saying that an entrepreneur is somebody who goes from working in their business to on their business. But there's a second tier of entrepreneur that you come across that goes from working on their business to working on themselves. And those are the type of people we put in the room.
Do you get great value yourself from these guys, or do you know them so well now that you get more value for when they're not showing their worth and doing the presentation? Is it better for you when it's the informal chat over a couple of pints, or have you not quite got that relationship either?
Oh, no, yeah, no, they're all personal friends, especially after the event. And that's where the value is. I mean, content is abundant. I mean, one of our speakers is Tim Ferriss. He charges $75,000 normally to do a talk. You can find any of his talks on YouTube. There's any of us really. So content is abundant. That's why it's kind of somebody who says, I can't get into business, I don't know where to start, that kind of stuff. It's somewhat of a, it's an excuse because you have access to all the information you could ever want. So it's the relationship with those people. And that's what we try to create an environment where the speakers want to stay for the entire 2 days, because the content you'll learn on stage will be, some of it will be new, some of it will be already know it. But content, again, is all over the place. It's context and how that stuff can apply in your business, and what happened at the bar after the event and those kind of things. Those relationships are what's key, and those relationships are hard to get.
Do you feel like you're creating magic when you've got those 100 people in the room? Is there a different atmosphere than you might get going to a seminar or a conference that's just been set up for the layman, somebody just interested in a subject? Is there electricity in the room?
Without a doubt. I mean, for me, I don't think I'm making magic per se. I think the environment is magical, just because the people we put in the room. It has nothing to do with their pedigree and business per se. One of the biggest kind of pre-qualifiers is is their future bigger than their past? I don't care if you sold a business for $100 million. If you're not interesting and you don't have any big plans for the future, you're probably not that interesting to me, in all honesty. And at the end, everybody who buys a ticket for our event, I hold a personal phone call with them to assess if they're the right fit. And at the end of every phone call, the core purpose is just to get to know them a little better. Because at my events, I want to know everybody's name. I want to know what their business is, who their ideal client is, what lights them up, what are they world class at, what's a pain in their business, how's the relationship with their kids. I want to know them to that level because then I know I can help them. And again, when you put those type of people in a room, it's absolutely amazing. I mean, there's some people I pick based purely on their energy. If I have a phone call with somebody and they drain my energy, there's a good chance they're going to drain the energy of the room. But if I have a phone call with somebody who's maybe doesn't have an incredible business pedigree, but has huge plans and is promising and that kind of stuff, I'll allow them to the event. At the end of every phone call, I ask myself, would I want to have dinner with this person? And if the answer is no, then I refund their ticket. And it's funny because one of the testimonials, there's a media publication that posted it last year. They said Mastermind Talks felt like a 2-day long dinner party in good company. Which is perfect, and which is ironic because the question I ask myself is, would I want to have dinner with this person?
So when you refund the money, that must be difficult for that person to take, because everyone thinks that they've got the personal qualities to be successful and to interact, and so they're trying to pay, obviously, quite a lot of money to come to an event, and you're saying, no, we don't want you. Does anyone sort of get a bit narky and a bit annoyed with you?
Oh yeah, I've had a ton of people angry, and I mean, it's hard for them. It's hard for me as well, because this money, we charge $4,000 or $5,000 to attend our events, so the money hits our bank account. And mind you, our first event, I was $250,000 in cash debt, so I refunded $43,000 in paid tickets for our last event. So this money would hit our bank account, and I'd assess they were not the right fit, and I'd refund them that money. So it's nuts. Like, it made no sense. By most people's standards, it's like you don't do that, especially from a business perspective. Yeah. But you definitely got a lot of flack from certain individuals, but also how they took it was a good indication on, if it was a good decision or not. Because if they totally flipped out, quite possibly I didn't want them to, they would have, again, they were probably not the best of fits for the event.
Well, I think it's an amazing thing, and if I ever get to the point when I could afford a ticket, I'm going to phone you up and give you so much energy and charisma that you're just going to have to say yes.
Well, I'm sure of it. Don't hesitate to reach out when it comes time.
I will do, I promise you. Just bringing us to the end of the show, because I know we're sort of getting close to the hour now. The final part of the show is what I call the sermon on the mic. And that is the part of the show when I hand over the presenting duties to yourself. And in a sense, you go back in time and you speak to your younger self about your life and what you feel they could achieve, and give them any tips and pointers to point them in the right direction for a life of success. So we're just going to go into that now. Once the music fades off, then I'm just going to be quiet and I'm going to hand over the presenting duties to you. This is a sermon on the mic.
Here we go with the best bit of the show, the sermon on the mic, the sermon on the mic.
So, little Jayson, I must say that all growth happens at the end of your comfort zone, and you need to get comfortable with the uncomfortable, because that's the only way you'll strive towards greatness. That's it. That's all I got. I'm not more interesting than that, unfortunately.
That was so short and profound. It actually took me by surprise. You're a man of very few words. A bit like Bruce Willis. We found the right person to play you in a movie. I'm sure.
Lovely. Lovely.
Well, it's been an absolute delight to have you on the show. You've been so generous and open and, of course, talkative. And the beauty about these shows, Jayson, is obviously we are connecting the dots. We're joining up the dots of your past life. But our lives continue. So any time down the future that you feel that you've got some new venture or some new opportunity that you're excited about, please come on and sort of share that story from here to there, because I'm a great believer that joining up those dots is the only way to build the future. So, Jayson Gaignard, thank you very much.
Thank you immensely for having me on the show.
That's the end of Join Up Dots. You've heard the conversation. Now it's time for you to start taking massive action. Create your future, create your life. It's the only life you've got. And we'll be back again real soon. Join Up Dots, Join Up Dots, Join Up Dots, Join Up Dots. Join Up Dots.